everybody, and welcome to this Farm Advisory Service webinar. This is the second in a series of 4 webinars on the theme of managing people. Tonight we are joined by 2 guest speakers from Greenburn. We've got Gail Ellis, the Managing Director, and Sophie Henderson, the Commercial HR Director. Greenburn is a family business with 18 years experience in helping rural businesses with HR. They work with individual farmers right up to larger ag organisations such as NFU and the Scottish Land and Estates. I'm sure we're in for another really interesting webinar with Gail and Sophie after our very successful webinar last week. But on that note, I am just going to hand over to Gail and Sophie to get us underway this evening.
Mari, thank you very much indeed for your introduction. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Some of you, I hope, are joining for the second time. Well, this session, we're going to talk about maximising and motivating. Last week, you'll recall that we talked about recruitment in some detail, getting the right person with the right skills at the right time into your business, and we touched on getting them actually in the first couple of weeks up and sort of running. So what we want to do today is really sort of go into that in a little bit more detail. Most of what we're suggesting here works for small businesses as well as big businesses, and as Mari said, we work extensively in the agri sector, so we have very small clients from a farmer who's got 1 worker to big farming organisations, let's put it that way, with many workers. So to start off then, let's assume you've got the right person in, they've started work with you, you've introduced them to everybody, and many of you may remember that last week I said the dreaded words, the hateful 2 words of job description. So please don't cringe. What you can do if you don't want to put a job description together is put together a list of key tasks that you want the person to do. I can't tell you how important this is because we come across this as a problem many times. We'll get a worker starting work and for some reason it doesn't quite go well after the first month or 2, the sort of relationships deteriorates, and we'll talk to the worker and they'll say, yeah, but I didn't know I was supposed to do this. I came to do this job and now they're asking me to do that. So make yourself a list of key tasks and make sure you go through it with them. The clever trick to do here is put down the key tasks. So if they're a dairyman, obviously then they might be bringing the cows in from the fields, they'll be operating the dairy equipment, they'll have lots of cleaning tasks to do, quality tasks. If, for example, you want them to do something different, so we've got 1 big dairy farm, and when they've got downtime, the farmer asks them to go and look at the grass, actually measure grass, and he trains people in measuring grass. I couldn't actually quite believe that when I first heard it, but it is true, and I've seen it myself. So just make sure that people know that they may have their day job, but they also have to take on other tasks as and when they're needed around the farm. And what we do as well is we put together the list of tasks, and then we put a little checklist next to them almost to see just how competent people are. Again, it's something else that we come across a lot. Maybe on CVs or covering letters, most of us oversell our skills a little bit, but we come across a lot of people that actually more than oversell, they possibly exaggerate their skills. So when they go onto the farm, they're not actually have the qualifications or the practical experience to do the jobs. If you're in the position where you're the employer, you'll be spending quite a bit of time in the first 2 or 3 weeks with the new worker. Watch them, see how they do things, and with against each of the key skills or the key tasks that they've got, give it a traffic light system. If they're green, yeah, you're perfectly happy with them, they're competent, you think they're good. If they're amber, maybe there's a little bit of training or a little bit of work to do. And as sometimes happens, actually, if they haven't got a clue, they're red, and you might have to come up with a secondary plan to sort of fix things. it's very, very important in the HR world that you keep notes and records, and it really is very, very important. Now, we're not HR people that suggest that, you know, you keep a book on every single person and write everything down that's said, but keeping a simple training plan and a simple plan of knowing what their skills are is just very important. So instead of like writing screeds, you can just color somebody green, and you know what that means, and then they'll know what that means when you're talking to them. And if you have any doubts about what their experience is, actually test them, you know. So we had a situation a few weeks ago where somebody went to work on a farm. I think this is actually one of Sophie's clients, and the young man went as a tractorman, and he said that yes, he was very good at repairing fencing. So the farmer, at some point, he'd only been working a few weeks, there were some fences down, and the farmer asked him to go and repair them, fix them, and he couldn't do it because actually he'd seen other people do it, but he'd never actually done it himself. So he came up red in that category. Saying that, he was skilled in all the other things. So the farmer then sent him to, interesting enough, a fencing company, and he spent a day with them learning how to do fencing. So just to save yourself any problems, don't always assume the knowledge is there. Look and see for yourself and test it and mark it down. Really important. Also, you know, it can cause disappointment if you think that, you know, somebody's coming in and they can do all these fantastic things, and then you think, oh, stop, they can't. These things, and to be honest, the lack of knowledge tends to come out at the busiest times. Guess what? You know, when you're really up against it. So you need to put the investment into people when they start working with you. It really is quite important. This system as well, the traffic light system, helps you put together a little training plan. And one of the really important things with the training plan is we believe very much in all our businesses that you need to be too deep. Now, when we talk about too deep, this is about building resilience into your business. Whatever size it may be, it might be just you and one other worker. But what you've always got to plan for holidays, if somebody goes sick, if there's a long-term sickness, somebody can't come into work, you've always got somebody else that can step into their role. So you'll appoint somebody for a specific job, but when they've been with you, it could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be 18 months. Start training them in other jobs around the business, whether it's a tourist business, whether you're in a farm business, when you're managing a farm shop. Make sure that you are always too deep and there are two people that can pick up every single task in the business. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's always you. Because often farmers take on everything themselves, and that means you don't have time to think about strategy and think about the annual accounts and putting financial forecasts together. Try and build yourself a bit of time in and use the concept of too deep. So they're with you, you're looking at what they're doing, you're assessing as you're going along how they work. The important thing is as well to keep talking and keep talking to the person. People, you know, go to work for many different things, but the first month is always a bit tricky. And so it's important that you make sure that they work to your standards, they work to your routines, and you can only do that by talking to them. Another very, very important point here is be friendly, but not friends. This thing is, you really must differentiate between being friendly and friends. I think, Sophie, you're working on something where this has got a bit muddled up at the moment, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. We have a situation with a client at the moment where we have 2 managers who line manage a joint team, a team of about 30. One manager is sticks to the rule of be friendly, not friends. Very friendly to members of their team, but knows where to draw the line, which makes management and tougher management easier to do. Their counterpart, unfortunately, has been there, I think, 40 years in the business, and has a management style of friends and favorites. This makes it, not only does this cause divide in their team of 30, because there's 2 very different management styles competing, it makes management of any situations under that manager's remit really difficult. So they let their friends away with things. They give them far more leeway than they would give other members of the team who aren't their friends, who haven't been with them for 30 odd years. And this actually causes real, for a manager, they may not see their problem. For the team underneath, all they see is that someone's being treated differently to them. And if that person, for any reason, is causing problems, they're being allowed to get away with it. So it undermines the rest of the management structure going on around you. And it certainly makes it very difficult to step in and performance manage or do disciplinaries or anything, because if you are the manager, your colleague is undermining you as well. So yeah, something that we see often. It's normally something that historic managers have allowed to happen because of the culture of the company, and it's one of those accepted practices. It's something that you really have to work on stamping out. Be friendly, not friends.
Yeah, over the years, I can't even begin to tell you the amount of situations we've had to try and mediate on where people have become too friendly. They become too friendly and they turn in late one day and you ignore it. Second day, you're a bit irritated, but you have a word and they say, oh, no, never again. Third time, it becomes, we find that people are too embarrassed to say anything, so they let things go. So it can work against you. So very, very important then. 2 points there, just to reiterate, always make sure that when you're starting a training plan for somebody, you make it too deep. And so that you're not only training them for the job that they're coming to do, but look a bit further ahead. Lift your head up and look further ahead to what the business will need in the future. And you will always need somebody that's trained just in case, just in case somebody else is sick, somebody else can't come in. And it really is about building resilience in your business, and very, very important. So then the final thing that we would say, and this is a tip, and it really does work very, very well. Most of the people that you'll employ will have worked somewhere else. The majority will have had a job somewhere else, maybe 2 or 3 jobs. So let them come into your business and let them do 3 months, 90 days. And then warn them that you want them to sit down with them and have a chat about their impressions about the business. What they've seen, what they think works well, what they think could be improved. Give them a few days notice and then have a cup of coffee with them. And if you're the manager, you sit with them. If you've got other managers or another director or something like that, it could be 2 of you, and just sit down and get their ideas. And the best way, as I said, to frame it is really what works well, what could be improved, what have you seen, what other different ideas have you seen in your working life that we could introduce here. If you do that, you will always pick up 1 or 2 tips, always. You might hear a lot of rubbish as well, but I mean, at the end of the day, businesses, if somebody's worked somewhere else before, they're probably operating a farm that's very similar to yours, but you just might pick up an idea that really adds value to your farm. Don't lose the opportunity of somebody new coming into your business, and actually you learning from them. And it's really important. It's also very important for maximising their contribution, because I'll tell you a little bit more when we go on to motivation, but even asking them their opinion. It's really important that they think, oh, well, actually, they're listening to me. If they do, I had one manager do this only last week, actually. God, I could have killed him, to be honest. This poor chap told him all the things that he thought were great and then all the things he thought were bad. And this manager started arguing with him. And I'm sort of trying to kick him under the table, saying, don't argue with him, just listen to what he's got to say. So don't take any criticism personally. It's their point of view, it's just their perception. But honestly, you will always learn something. So another tip, at 90 days, put it in your diary that you're going to sit down with them with a cup of coffee. Always better if there's 2 of you to sit down with the person and just say, what's working really well, but what can we improve on? And it's what you can improve on that is a really critical bit.
I completely agree. I've been in many a situation. I don't tend to kick people under the table.
I do.
I don't tend to kick them. I have a habit of touching people's elbows, not grabbing, obviously, because that'd just be weird, but just sort of tapping them. And the amount of people, if I haven't, normally I don't warn people that I'm going to do it because I don't think they're going to argue. I always think the best. But when they do start to argue, just a tap on the elbow actually really makes people stop and think, what am I saying? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, where am I on track? Little physical cues can sometimes help as well. And now we'll quickly pause. Mari, is there any questions for us after Maximise before we move on to Motivate?
Nope, there's no questions at the moment, Sophie, so happy to continue.
Oh, good. We love it when we can just keep firing onwards. If you were with us last week, you'll notice we just fired all the way through before asking any questions. Okay, let's move on to Motivate then. Gail, do you want to kick us off with the 3 I's?
Yeah, motivating is a really interesting topic. We use it for the 3 I's. We always say involve people, invest in them, and include them. And I'll go over those points at the moment. The first thing I should say is research shows time and time again that it's not always just about the money. Yep, the money is an important part to all of us, I'm sure, but it's not always just about the money. And you know, with the agricultural wages order, you've got your salaries and your payments set out there, and to be honest, they're quite fair. And I don't think many people would argue with that, especially the sick pay and things like that. But it's not always about the money. And we find that when people are unhappy at work and you know, we're asked to go and speak to them, they'll say, oh, yeah, I'm not paid enough and I should be paid this. At least 80% of the time, that's not the actual full story. There's always something else beneath it. So investing in people is really important. When you take somebody on, even the recruitment process is going to cost you money, even if it's money in your lost time in interviewing people and getting the paperwork, getting them on the payroll and all this stuff. So you've got to make people feel as if they want to work for you. So the key points here then is you need to involve people. You need to talk to them. Actually talk to them. You don't have to be friends, as we've already said. We know many people, they don't even like their workers very much, but they respect their ability. And that's all we would ask. It's more about respect. So talk to them, give them feedback, and be prepared yourself to receive feedback as well. And if they do a good job, say thank you. Doesn't cost anything. It just say thank you, because small thank yous actually can go a long way. It really is about making people feel valued, and the valued piece comes up every single time in the research. People go to work because they want to feel valued. They want to feel that if they don't turn up the next day, you're really going to miss them. Their colleagues will miss them, because what they do well, and it's important. So it's again, treat your employees and workers the way you yourself would like to be treated. So it's talking to them, it's giving a little bit of praise, ask their opinion about something. And you know, some people will be surprised and some people will give you too much opinion, but at least ask, because it's involving them. And when you're going to introduce change into your business or do something different, actually it's very, very important to involve people and talk to them about it. You know, quite bluntly, you may well have decided that you're going to change that piece of kit and it's going to cause that amount of work. It doesn't mean to say that you won't do it, but at least talk to them and take them on the journey with you. So when you do introduce it, it's not such a shock. We find, again, change is one of the biggest challenges for people, especially workers that have been working for many, many years in the same business. Change can be a real problem, and it's just scary. So make sure you speak to them, involve them in decision makings at times, ask them their opinion. What do you think about this? If they feel that they've had a say in something, they're actually more likely to go along with it. And another thing to do as well is, if you've got a larger workforce, and maybe some people that have been there quite a long time, we quite often say, if you're bringing new people in, introduce them before you appoint them. to the couple of people that they might be working with, especially if you're recruiting and they're going to work for a manager or a supervisor. Involve that manager or supervisor in the decision-making process, because actually they have then more vested interest. They'll help them to work and they'll help them to succeed. It really doesn't take a lot of time to talk to people. I'm not saying gossip. Please don't gossip. It's talking about the job, it's talking about things maybe sort of that are more transactional, as we would say, than more emotional. But I think going along and saying, how's that gone today? What do you think about this? Where's that happening? Had any ideas about how we do this a bit better? Those sorts of conversations. And if people do try and drag you down into the sort of, well, you'll never guess what happened to her or what happened to him, just walk away, just ignore it, because that's not your place. That's pulling you into the friends category, and you want to make sure you differentiate between friendly and friends. So I think the other thing to do here is to make sure that you're fair with people in that. And some more practical suggestions is, if they need to go to the doctors and the dentist, just be a bit flexible with time. Sometimes people have childcare. Try and be flexible about that. Make sure you know what the parameters are that are acceptable to you, because then you use those parameters for everybody. For example, many of the businesses we work with, you can take time off to go to the doctors or the dentist, or if you have childcare problems, but you pay it back within a month, something like that. But if you're going to do that, make sure that everybody does the same things. Make sure your workers get breaks, especially if they've got young families, even 3 or 4 day breaks at least every quarter, so they've got time with their family that they can rely on. And that means you not phoning them and asking them to come in unless it's an absolute emergency, because the times we come across this where there is a bit of angst between the family needs and the workers' needs, because the farmer keeps calling them in when they're supposed to be on holiday. So, you start getting up against the partner and the children, then you're going to lose as the employer. So try and get a balance there. It's all common sense stuff. And talk to them about more strategic things as well, not just their daily work, but you will have in your team some people that are looking for you for not just a job, but they want to stay with you for quite a long time. So they'll be interested to know about what your future plans are. Don't be afraid to talk to them, because your future plans will inevitably involve some change. And that's taking them along with you at the same time. And they will also, you can talk to them about where they want to go, what their ambitions are, how they see their career developing. And quite often people will surprise you. They'll say, actually, I'm doing this now, but I quite want to do this in the future. You'll be able to make sure that you can plan your workforce. It's quite often we come across younger people going into agriculture, then they come out again and take a break, and they go and work somewhere else because they've decided it's not quite for them. They come back when they're sort of in their early 30s again. So when you do take somebody on, make sure that you get an understanding of where they see their future going, where they see their career going. It means, quite frankly, that you don't invest a huge amount of money in somebody that's going to be with you only for a year and you didn't know about it in the beginning. Now, this is a word that you're just going to all die, I know, when I say this, but appraisals, I know, hideous, isn't it? Even the mere thought of it. And so let's just use the word as a term you should at least once a year have a sit down with each of your workers and just talk about how the year's gone, what went well, what went badly. Could they have improved in anything? Could you have improved on anything? And are there any sort of training gaps that you see or that they see? Very important to do that, because it also it puts the relationship in context, employer and employee. Although you're having a two-way conversation, clearly you're in the chair. And if you do want them to develop in different directions, this is a time to talk to them about it and see how it aligns with their career future. I must say though, having an annual appraisal is not the time to bring up, you were late on Monday and you were late last week and I've had enough of it. Those conversations should happen as the misdemeanors occurring, not an appraisal meeting. But we found that at appraisal meetings, very often, very interesting things come out, and you'll suddenly get to realise that the partner's not happy and they need to move. Their job isn't working out for them. There are issues with the manager or the team that you don't know about. So it's important to just put some time aside in the winter months when you're a bit quieter to sit down with people over a cup of coffee and just take some brief notes. On our website, we do have a performance review or an appraisal form. It's a bit long, I think, maybe, but just use it. Again, paperwork, critically important in the HR world. And people, to be honest, only really end up in tribunals when they don't have the right paperwork or they can't prove that they've done things in the correct way.
It is not long. I have seen much longer in my time.
It's 4 pages, Sophie.
It is not. It's not. It's not. Don't be put off. It's not 4 pages. I think Gail's right. The word appraisal has a real stigma attached to it. We all dread appraisals. It's a really historic stigma as well. So if you do go on the website, that is the link. Otherwise, it's under downloadable documents. We call them continuous performance reviews. And actually, we recommend that you have them more than once a year, because they're just meant to be touching base, having conversations, seeing where there could be performance improvement, where there needs to be development, and investing time in that employee to sit down and say, okay, well, you know, you might not want to be a customer service administrator, posh term for just a customer service employee. You might not want to be that all of your life. Let's be realistic. You might want to be the office manager. You might want to be an owner of a company yourself. What are your aspirations and ideas? Because if not only if you know them as the employer, can you prepare for them, you can invest in that employee. They will stay longer, they'll be much happier, because you're taking a really inclusive approach to them and their development. And how fantastic is that if we all had employers, no shade, that did that, because it is a really, really holistic way of doing it. Certainly Gail does it for me and our employees, and it's a really wonderful way of being able to work, because you know that you're being heard.
You didn't say that to me last time.
Okay, well, yeah, when you're reviewing performance, and also that's the point there. The CPRs, continuous performance reviews, they're positive conversations. There will be aspects that you need to look at development and improvement, but take away that stigma from appraisals where they were negative, where, you know, you sat, I'm sure you all remember from first jobs when you sat down with a manager after 6 months of being in the role and they said this, that, the next thing, and you're graded at this, and tick the box and off you went. Have that conversation, grade them in a traffic light system if that's the easiest way of doing it. It can be really, really made to fit what fits you. That's what they're meant to do. And in just involve asking for ideas and suggestions. That doesn't have to be a big thing either. You can do that within the reviews, which is a great way to do it, one-to-one. You could have every quarter, every half year, a half an hour sit down with your team over a cup of coffee and say, look, I'm here to listen. I want your ideas. And give them a framework. This is what I'm thinking of. This is a new market sector I want to go into. This is a new development we're thinking of in the business. What are your ideas? That's a really great way of getting people to talk and open up as well. So a couple of things to think about on Motivate. Any questions? Oh, sorry, off you go.
Add one thing, Sophie. Just thinking of a trend that's happening at the moment that you may be interested in. Many of you may have workers that are really critical to the business. I'm thinking about farm managers or specialists in some way. What we're seeing, and we've seen over the last 2 years, I know we said it's not all about money, but we've seen some businesses, quite a few actually, developing systems where they will give a bonus to these, let's call them key workers. Let's call them key workers just for the sake of a term. That is a bonus that comes, they pay that if the business has a very profitable year, it achieves its budget that it was hoping to, plus at least 10 to 15%. So budget plus 10 to 15%, and you determine the figure. Then the key workers get a small bonus that comes out of the extra profit that you've made. Now, we all have good years and bad years, so it's not a guaranteed bonus by any means. But what it does do is, if you've had a great year, it rewards the key people. And in fact, we've got some businesses that actually reward everybody if they have a really good year. And it can be just, you know, we've got one business that if they have a good year, they give everybody £50. But it can be anything. But what it does do is it links performance and contribution to the success of the business. And if there has been a successful business and you're thinking, God, we've done really well this year, actually other people think, actually we've done well as well because we're getting a bonus. When they don't get a bonus, they feel it. And so that means they've got far more vested interest in your business. This is something that needs to be worked out, and so you'll need, and there are tax implications and all sorts of stuff here, so you'll need some advice on that. But it's something to consider, especially if you've got a growing business and you want to keep people. It's what we call the golden handcuffs. It's a way of making people feel they may not be a partner in your business, they may never have any shares in your business. It may be a family business and all that is precluded, but they could earn a bit more money for actually their contribution to the business. So an important point to remember.
Absolutely. Mari, any questions for us after Motivate before we quickly move on?
Yep, thanks, Sophie. There is actually one or two came in that I think now would be a good time to bring those in. So the first one is, if you've got a long-standing workforce that's maybe became a little bit stuck in a rut in their ways, would you have any tips for starting to implement some of those techniques that you mentioned there within Motivate?
Gail, do you want to take a stuck in their ways workforce? Yeah, I always get the stuck in their ways ones. Very, very difficult situation. And as I said before, the theory behind this, and actually practical application behind this, is to take people along with you. You've got long-standing workforce. Now, I'm sorry for anybody that really doesn't like working with psychology and personality, but there are certain personality types that really do not like change. They really don't like change at all. So the way, I can just tell you the way we address this. We actually, we get the team together and we get them to do, in a very fun way, a personality profile. It's our own one, so that we can give them feedback on the spot as a group in a sort of light-hearted way. We can tell the people there who don't like change. And we design it so that we bring that out as a topic of discussion. The amount of people in the workforce that are there, you'll always find at least 30% in a team don't like change, and you'll have one or two mavericks and the rest are easy-ozy, but you need to involve me. So one of the ways to overcome this sort of stalemate when you can't move people on is to actually have a conversation about how we all react differently to change and how we are able to do it. What you'll find is overnight people will think, well, that's not me, I'm really good at change, I've been changing all my life. Then they'll go and think about it, and when they come back to work the next day, they've already moved a little tiny bit. And then you start the tactics of involving them and discussing it. As I said earlier, you may very well know the destination you're going to, and you're already at the end. You just need to work the tactics to get people there with you. And it's about, when you come to change, you're not talking about your business, you're talking about people. And it's about people, and you need to invest the time in talking to them and getting their ideas, because if people are resistant to change, it's because they're afraid. and it's afraid how they're going to impact their job. We again see in it many times where new computer systems have come in, new technologies come in, and we get real problems in some of the offices that we work in, where somebody who works wonderfully and will have great skills, but all of a sudden they just have an attitude. We have problems, and it's because they're scared. So it's finding a way, and personality and doing something fun that makes it actually not scary is a good way to start it off. I hope that helps a bit.
Yep, no, that was great, thank you. And just one final question then that sort of came on the back of that really is, if your employees are friends or family members, any tips for maybe dealing with that sort of situation and performance reviews for them?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a common one actually in any kind of agri-business. We often see friends of and family groups all working in the same area. What happens is, obviously with family groups, is they don't differentiate between working together, working as individuals in a team together, and being a family member. It does make, is a difficult situation. It does make management a lot harder. What, from my point of view, and having managed family members, it's always about taking the objective approach. It's not about their relationships with each other. You treat them like a team. It's about their relationship with you in those situations, and therefore the communication has to be, it's not based on, oh yeah, we know you've got such and such working here and such. It's not about that. It's about how is their performance, what are their ideas, treating them as an individual outside of their family. That is not going to stop them from gossiping and chatting as a family group. You can't stop that to a certain extent. What you can do is try and get them to sort of get on board with the fact that they're a team, they're working for you as individuals, and involving them in that way. You're not looking at a hierarchical system of family. You are having those conversations one-to-one. You are following through with what you're saying in training and development, and you're not taking into account that you have friends or family members. It can be tough. It is tough. It can be tough, and it is tough, especially and when you've got your own family and your own friends working for you. You have to set boundary lines. They have to know that when you are at work, you are their employer, you have responsibilities for the business, and they have responsibilities in their roles. And I often have said, and I know managers, and I suggest managers that say, I know we're friends, but we're working right now, and this is the conversation I need to have with you as an employer or as a line manager. And it helps them reassess the situation. They suddenly realize, actually, oh, I am your friend, okay, but you're going to treat me like an employee, okay. It helps reassess their view of the world. Gail, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think a good tip, something that we do a lot, is friends and family difficult. Okay, really difficult. Because you can't separate the personality out of the business. So what we have introduced a few times is what we call the 360 review. So if you've got somebody who's working in the business who's a family member, instead of it just being a review that's on a one-to-one, what you do is you ask about 4 or 5 other people that they interact with. Now that can be colleagues, it could be a customer, it could be a supplier, it could be another family member, and you ask some very carefully crafted questions, and they feed their results in. And let's say the questions can be on communications, it can be what are their service levels like, how hard do they work, how well do they communicate, and the results come in and they are averaged, the scores are averaged across these questions, and then your job is to feed back to the family member or friend what the collective view is of them. Because often we don't see ourselves as other people see us. We really don't, most of us. We all think, well, we're wonderful and we get on really well. And we've seen many, I have to say, many family businesses that are challenged with behavior a lot of the time, and the person genuinely doesn't see it. So the 360 review idea is really powerful, I can tell you, because it's not just a one-to-one, so it's not confrontational with one person to another. It's actually collective views that are put together on a chart and a table, even a bar chart. And when somebody sees that's what other people across a range of disciplines think of them, it really does make them reflect, and you can out of that have a really productive conversation. And we found that, I think, probably one of the most powerful things we've done in the last couple of years, isn't it? We've done things like that with boards of directors, but quite a few family businesses as well. So hopefully that's something to consider anyway.
Yep, no, that's great. Thank you very much. That's all the questions for just now.
Perfect. We will move on then. Keep accidentally hitting buttons today. What to do when it doesn't go well, I think, is an apt subject to talk about after maximising and motivating. Talking maximise and motivate, we talk about it in a really positive context where everything's going to go well. It's blue sky thinking. We know that's not the case in actual practice, so we want to cover a little bit of what to do when it doesn't go well, including some of the process. So, top 3 reasons that there are problems: lateness, not being able to do the job, and attitude. So what we're going to do is break these down. I think Gail's going to cover lateness and not being able to do the job, and I will come back with attitude and process to make sure that you always stay on the right side of the law. Gail, would you like to take on lateness? Okay,
so in our many years of being in practice, we have found that when it when it is all going to go belly up, normally the first thing it's about is people being late to work. And we'll get a call from one of our farmer clients saying it's the 3rd time he's been late and this isn't acceptable. So this is really, I think, the most common problem, to be perfectly frank. So what you've got to do is just quickly walk you through this, is whatever you see happening with a person coming onto your farm in the first 3 to 6 months, if they're late, please don't ignore it. Just don't think, oh, shame, never mind, the car broke down, or you've heard something third hand. You cannot do that. If they're going to be late, when they come in, go and talk to them. Why were you late? And they'll say, oh, I couldn't get out of bed, the alarm didn't go off, the car broke down, the dog's sick, the cat's run away, whatever it may be. And unless it's something really dire, like, my wife's gone into labor, or my father's ill, or an accident's happened, excuse me, just make sure that they understand that actually, being late is not acceptable in your business. Not only do they need to be there on time to start work at 6 o'clock, they need to be there by 10 to 6. On this occasion, you'll let it go, but if they're late again, you'll come back and have another word. That conversation is so powerful, because they will know that, oh God, I'm not going to be able to get away with that, because there are quite a lot of people in the market that actually just are consistently late. They just don't seem to be able to help it. So if you don't tackle it, what happens? Next time they're late, they think, oh, he never said anything last time, she never said anything, she probably won't say anything this time. But also, if you've got other workers, they're looking, thinking, how come she can be late and nothing was said? If I'm late, I was told. So make sure you address it straight away. Now, if somebody's late again within, a week or so, you've got to sort of go back and say, this is the 2nd time you've been late. So what happened? You'll get a story again, and say, I don't want to see you being late again. If you are, then I'm going to have to take it more seriously. If they're late for a 3rd time, and normally we say if they're late 3 times in 3 months, you then need to be sitting down with them and really sort of having a chat with them, which is an informal chat. Now, when we're saying informal, it's starting the process of, this isn't acceptable to us, and if you don't improve and you don't have a sustained improvement in your timekeeping, we're going to have to part company. Okay, and you need to be having these discussions right from day one. I cannot tell you how many times we get a call from somebody saying, well, he's been with me 2 years, 2 years and 8 months, and he's always been late. So I say, well, have you had any conversations with him? Well, not really. I've got my head in my hands at this point, because you can so easily sort this thing out. Quite often you'll find that if somebody can't get out of bed or they're consistently late, when they realize that this is a very, very important aspect of working for you, timeliness, they'll leave themselves. They'll realize it's not the job for them, because the structure, they don't like the structure. They'll think it's too strict, but you must address it. It's quite difficult in under employment law to let people go, and that's why we talk about keeping records and doing things properly. And when you're talking to people about being late, you can say, actually, you were late 2 weeks ago on the 3rd, and you told me it's a car broken down, and now today, which is the 14th, you're late again, and this time it's because your alarm clock didn't go off. So, and make sure that they've got to see that you've got the detail and the facts. Very important. So you can let them 3 months, assess it over 3 months. If they're late 3 times, then you have this informal discussion with them. Informal discussion means that they're told that enough's enough. It's not acceptable anymore. They really need to get their act together and make sure they're in on time. You need to make a note of that discussion. Handwritten's fine, and just keep it, put the date on it, where spoke to him or her on this time in this place, and basically they were late again, and whatever excuse or reason they gave, and then just make a note of it and keep it on your file. If they're then again late going forward, then we're starting to go into the more formal discussions, which could eventually lead to you parting company with them. It's easy to do if you make sure you keep the records and you go through a process, and the process under the law is always about communication and having a two-way discussion with people. It's also, again, about every farm, every business has different parameters. They have different sets of rules. Some businesses we know are really easy-ozy. They don't mind if people start work between the hours of 8 and 11. You can come in any time, but you and I know in agricultural businesses, people need to be there to do jobs at a certain time. So you need to make sure that when anybody starts working with you, they understand that.
That's similar, in reality, it's the same process for if they're not able to do the job. If someone is lacking skills, you have invested in their training and they are still not getting it. For example, I had a client that I dealt with this week who the employee that they'd taken on had taken on having a certain amount of skills, having a certain amount of knowledge and experience, ready to hit the ground running. In their office, they happen to do an internal test to ensure the knowledge is in place before they can go and talk to customers. It's quite standard, it's not a big deal. The employee failed it. They were given another 3 weeks to a month to prep for the next one. They failed it again. They then went back and said, okay, well, let's give you the original test you were given with your first employer that has therefore told us that you were qualified. Let's give you that. Let's just check your knowledge and let's see where we're coming from. Gave it to them, failed it. Got 60%, needed 80% pass rate. And I spoke to the manager in question, and they were tearing their hair out. They've taken on an employee who has said they've got all this knowledge and experience, and they don't. What are they going to do? The beauty was this manager had handled this situation from the get-go, had a lot of communication, a lot of back and forth, had given them adequate time to prepare for these tests, knowledge tests and things, and performance reviews, and everything was documented, and it all happened within the employee's probationary period. So actually we were able to sit down and have a frank conversation and say, look, this is the evidence. 1, 2, 3, fail. I think actually, you know what, it's probably, you've not come with the experience that we thought. I think it's probably time to part ways. And the conversations can be, they're not smooth and they're not simple, but they can be as regimented as that. You can have them as cleanly as that when situations are handled. And I know a lot of people will have taken on historic situations, and yes, those are a lot harder to deal with because there is an assumed history. You might have taken on someone who is been late every day for the past 2 years, but under your reign, that's not acceptable. The starting place is having the first conversation and saying what you think is acceptable and what is not. And I'll quickly just go through the process because Gail's already spoken about it, and then circle back to attitude. So as Gail said, there's a simple process. It looks heavy duty and everyone rolls their eyes, but don't worry, it's not actually. It's really, really simple. Start with that first informal conversation, verbal conversation. This is unacceptable. What are your reasons? Right, okay, don't let it happen again. Obviously, we normally allow for 2 of those in sort of fairly quick succession. The third one, as Gail said, is an informal conversation that's documented. You write notes about it, you sit them down, you have it in a more formal setting. You don't just have it verbally face to face, you have it in a more formal setting so you can take notes. Okay, and you go over, okay, you were late this time, and now this time, these were the reasons. I need to see this improving. If this doesn't improve, we'll have to take more formal action. If that is the case, formal action is the next step. They're officially invited to a meeting to discuss the issue. Now, lateness and not being able to do the job is slightly different. Lateness comes under disciplinary. Not being able to do the job will come under performance. For a disciplinary, something just to note, they have a statutory right to be accompanied to any disciplinary meetings. So they're invited, you have the conversation. Again, you just go through what the problem is, and then you decide objectively whether you should issue a sanction, a written warning. If that is the case, that is the case. They have the right to appeal it to another manager, etc. However, if you believe due process has been done, then you can issue that written warning. And again, if it happens again, you have another formal conversation. Invite them, have the conversation, issue a final written warning if appropriate, or you have a conversation and say, look, I think this is a done deal now, I think we have to part ways. Obviously, that's highly simplified. Come and ask for advice if this is something you need to do, but it is as simple as 4 steps. Don't let anyone say any different. It's as simple as 4 steps to do these kind of processes for both. Now, I'll quickly flick to attitude because I think it's more prevalent actually at the moment. We're finding that employers are becoming more responsive to individuals' attitude, because actually an attitude can have a wide-ranging effect, more so than if someone's late. And where attitude starts to develop, assuming they haven't walked in with the attitude, where attitude starts to develop is if Maximise and Motivate go wrong. If an employee or a worker starts to feel disenfranchised, they don't feel like they're being heard, and this could be by yourself as the owner or MD, or it could be by their line manager. As soon as an employee stops feeling heard, they start to feel disenfranchised, and with that, it starts to manifest in really bad attitude. It might not be to your face, but it could be within their colleagues. There could be a lot of gossip, a lot of chat back and forth. These are things that we like to sort of knuckle out, and the way to do that is to recognize it, sit them down, have a conversation one-to-one. What is going on? I think a lot of people are afraid of saying that because they don't know what's going to come out, and you have to be fairly resilient yourself just to support that. But what is going on? I've noticed these comments, I'm seeing these things happen. This is new, this is unheard of. What's wrong? Can I help? Why are you unhappy? And we can't always help with everything. That's just not how employment works. But we can help with a lot of things. And if it is a case of they've fallen off the bus, as people say sometimes, if they've fallen off the wagon, they don't feel motivated, they feel that they're not being heard, etc., etc., whatever the reason is, fill in the blank. The first step then is giving them the time to be heard, having the conversation. If attitude continues, it starts to wander down a disciplinary route. But the first thing is that informal conversation, and that's one to really look out for. Now, I know we're running very close to time, as we did last week, so I will pass back to Gail for a final summary.
Okay, so looking on the bright side then, because we've just touched briefly on when it all goes wrong, but don't despair, because there are lots of actions you can take to bring it back in line. Webinar about maximising and motivating. Let's just have a look very quickly of the benefits of maximising an employee's contribution to your business. Do you know what? They add value. They really do add value. And please remember, that's what you're employing them for, to add value, even if they add value by giving you more time. It also, don't forget the concept of too deep. They're helping to you to make your business more resilient. So always bring somebody in for one job, but over a period of time, make sure that they can train to do other people's jobs as well. And that's about making your business resilient. Motivating, I mean, the research shows time and time again, years after years, you know, that motivated workers are more productive. They really are. They'll become vested in the success of your business, and everybody wants to be involved in something that's successful. And the most important thing, I think, is that anybody that's motivated is willing to adopt new ideas and go along with change. So you've got positive attitude within your employees. So it does take time. We always say to managers, and I'm sure every one of you has a day job, a technical day job, but managing people can take up to 30% of your time, depending on the amount of people you've got, 30% of your time. But you need to invest the time, because actually the benefits, you know, actually do outweigh the investment. So thank you very much, and I will ask any further questions before we finish.
For the final time, Mari, are there any questions that we can answer?
We have had one or two come in, so just let me get them up here. So talking then about some of those conversations that need to be had, would there be any point that you would recommend bringing in another person or a third party to witness any of those conversations?
Yes, absolutely. A fantastic question. Third party, I would bring in when you get to formal stage. Informal is meant to be what it says on the tin. It's meant to just be one-to-one. As soon as they start getting the right to bring an accompanying person in disciplinary action, or you start to go into formal action for performance, take another person, take them in as a note taker, a silent note taker, and then if for any reason the employee brings an accompanying, it's not 2 against 1, it's 2 against 2. I have often taken a note taker. I always advise to take a note taker, because what happens is they are there to listen only, take notes only, and they can hear things that you don't hear. They'll hear nuances that you don't hear, because we all have our own perception of the world, and that can really support you and be beneficial to you when making any harder decisions.
Sophie, can you record the conversations in the case you can't get a note taker?
Fantastic question, Gail. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, yes, of course you can record the conversations. You can record them on your phone, but if you're doing a digital recording, let the person know that that's happening, so that they also have the right to do it. If you do not want it to be recorded digitally, tell them, make that very clear from the off. But obviously in this kind of digital age we are living in, and everything's happening over Zoom to a huge extent, or Teams or whatever, recording, yes, absolutely. And if you can't take notes, or you don't feel confident in your note-taking skills if you're on your own, because you can't a lot of people can't multitask to that level because it requires sort of dual split, record it, absolutely record it.
That's great, thank you. I'm conscious of time, but just one more final question there. We were talking about the 4-step process. What would be the situation if there was sort of gross negligence or a severe issue that was maybe a bit more severe than lateness or similar to that, can you skip some steps? Can you go straight in a bit more higher level?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, if there's gross negligence, if there is gross misconduct, skip it. Skip informal and skip the first stage of formal. You end up immediately in the second stage of formal action, where you're having a conversation and your outcomes are a final written warning or termination of contract. It is quite drastic. So what needs to happen is you actually insert an investigation stage first and foremost, and you have a third party do the investigation, talk to witnesses, talk to the person. So all the facts are on the table. You then have a disciplinary hearing, and in that, you do have a note taker, absolutely, for that one. The other party can have an accompanying. You go through the findings and a decision is made on those. So absolutely, there are ways to skip steps. If you are not confident in people management or haven't done that kind of thing before, always ask for support and ask for help from someone like us or an ACAS, etc., because the law is very protective of the employee. So we need to make sure that all the steps are done in terms of the employer, especially if it's going to end in termination. But yes, you can skip steps.
Thank you very much there. Like I said, I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to thank you very much, Gail and Sophie, for another really interesting webinar. You covered a lot of information there, and I think it's safe to say that we can all take away some tips from that.